This conference will now be recorded.
Hello and welcome. Thanks for joining our CampaignHQ webinar to talk about ConTEXT, our peer-to-peer text messaging service. I'm joined today by Walter Haney, our campaign director, who's going to give us a demonstration of how the system works and how you can send individual text messages to your voting audience. We're really excited to share with you how we can reach voters and have authentic two-way conversations by text message. And we want this webinar to be interactive too. So if you've got questions at any time, just put your questions in the chat box. We'll take questions as we can throughout the presentation, as well as taking some questions at the end if you have them. A lot of folks on this call know CampaignHQ as the best conservative call center in America. So why would we want to talk to you about text messages? We've known for a long time that eventually cell phones, mobile devices are going to be the only way to reach voters. They aren't just replacing landlines, though. This is where people watch TV. It's where they read, where they listen to the radio. It's not just where you have your conversations, it's where you consume your media. And that's what makes a mobile device, a smartphone, not just simply a replacement for a landline phone. So now the problem is, how do we have conversations with people under this new paradigm? You can manually dial cell phones, and we do, but it's a slow process, and the fact is some folks are never going to return your call. You can target them with digital ads, and that works, and you should do that, but it's not a two-way conversation where you can respond to what that person is saying to you in real time and feed them an appropriate information, a response based on what they're telling you as they're telling it to you. And last but not least, we can blast message to cell phones. We can do a blast text message, but that requires an opt-in to be legal. And right now, a lot of us are looking at reaching mid to low propensity voters, those people who voted in the 2016 presidential elections, who were so excited about President Trump, and we aren't sure they're going to show up in this November in their midterm elections. And let's be honest, those are not the people who are going to go to your website, sign up for your text messages, and proactively agree to receive your communications. So where does that leave us? At CampaignHQ, the way I look at it is we're in the business of having conversations. And as people change the way they have conversations based on technology, we're going to change the way that we deliver those conversations, the way that we have those conversations with people. Because at the end of the day, what we want to do is we want to elect conservatives, we want to promote we want to defend the Constitution and protect life, and we want to help you win. So that brings us back to today's topic, peer-to-peer text messaging. And for folks who are new to peer-to-peer text messaging, I always say look at it like a phone call. A real person is sending out a message in real time, and someone is reading and responding to what you say. All of that using a script that you have already approved. It's personalized. When you respond, we respond with an appropriate answer. We can ID supporters, we can get out the vote, turn people out for events, and we can even activate people to call their senators like a patch-through call. So in some ways, it's actually more robust and more rich than just a voice conversation. So I'm really excited to share what we can do to help you. And so I'm going to turn it over to Walter Haney to give you all a quick demonstration.
Sorry. There. But yeah, so we're here to talk about peer-to-peer texting, and this isn't something that's new in politics. In fact, the left has found a way to use this, and they've been using it effectively for years. Back in 2016, this technology was considered Bernie Sanders' secret weapon, and it's arguably the #1 way that he got voters to get involved, and in far larger numbers than Hillary or the DNC expected. He effectively used text messages to drive huge numbers of young, previously uninvolved voters to his campaign events. He was able to mobilize this new demographic because he was actually reaching them on a channel when nobody else was.
So actually, we saw a poll by Live Person Inc. I'm sure this comes as no surprise, but 7 in 10 millennials and Gen Z prefer to text over having a phone conversation. And I think we're seeing that, just in our phone pickup rates on the mobile channel, and comparing that to what we're seeing with peer-to-peer texting.
Yeah, and I think it makes sense, and it fits with how a lot of the people that I know tend to communicate on a day-to-day basis. It's different now than it used to be, and text is that preferred channel to talk to your loved ones, coworkers, etc. We talked about Bernie Sanders in 2016. If you fast forward to 2018, we're right now finding ourselves pretty far behind where the Democrats where the Democrats are as far as using text messaging, and the margin is pretty big. They've got more experience. The tools they're using are more mature. And as an industry, as the Democratic machine, they've more fully accepted SMS messaging as a channel for doing voter contact than the right side of the aisle has to date. Speaking of those tools, there's a few methods available to contact voters using SMS message. I'd like to talk a little bit about each one. I'm fairly certain that right now CampaignHQ is probably the most experienced vendor offering text message services on the right side of the aisle. We're approaching 1 million text messages in 2018 so far, and we've used them to turn out voters to campaign rallies, to telephone town halls. We've done Get Out the Vote, voter ID, and we're even experimenting right now with a little bit of fundraising, which is really exciting. So to talk about the tools used to make this happen, the first one, the most common tool out there that's available is sending out a blast message. This is not new technology in the least. Businesses have been using this for a long time for coupon programs and rewards programs and dental appointment reminders, et cetera, et cetera. And when I say a blast text message, I mean that you load up a list, you load up a message, you hit the send button, and the computer does all the work. It sends out all your messages, it categorizes responses programmatically, et cetera, et cetera. The one big disadvantage to using a blast message is that, first, it's very efficient. It gets a lot of messages out. You just click send, you set it up. It's fairly simple to do. You get that message out there. The problem is that it requires that opt-in. You need to have a written opt-in from every phone number that you're going to be sending a text message to. And that can be something that's difficult to obtain, if not impossible to obtain, for some of the universes that we most want to target when we're talking about politics and elections, that lower propensity donor. The other technology, and this is what I think that the left has used the most of, is this peer-to-peer text, right? What we're here to talk about today. The peer-to-peer texting is when one person is texting one person. So it's just like, me sending a text to you, that's a peer-to-peer text. There's some software available that allows you to, kind of organize those messages and deliver them in an efficient way to larger numbers than you could do on your personal phone. And oftentimes that gets used in essentially a text bank, where just like a phone bank, you set up software, you've got your list of voters that you want to reach out to, you've got your message scripted out, and you have a group of volunteers sit and send out those text messages.
Yeah. And I guess the thing that I would say about that is, I understand that sending out peer-to-peer text messages is something that volunteers can do. They absolutely can. But you have to ask yourself, with fewer than 90 days left until the election, is that really the highest and best use of your volunteer? Or should that volunteer be at the door? I think evidence suggests that your finite volunteer resources should be used at the door if and when possible. Having us send your text messages is scalable, is just infinitely scalable. And when you think about what it's like to have volunteers at a phone bank, consider what some of those pitfalls are, multiplied by 10 or 20 when they're doing something that's unfamiliar. Some of the things we've seen is you get a volunteer to download an app on their phone, and you get the app on Betty's phone. She sends 3 messages, your phone freezes up, or she doesn't know what to say and she just goes totally rogue. And then after she sends those 3 messages, she spends another 10 minutes telling you about them. All of these text messaging apps advertise that your volunteers can send 1,000 or 2,000 or 4,000 text messages an hour. And while technically that's true, I think the reality has proven that it is a small percentage of that, just simply because of the nature of human beings, the nature of volunteers. And what makes volunteers so precious and their time so valuable is that human contact that they can have at the door. And so this is a real opportunity to use your volunteers for the best purpose, and then have us do something that is scalable and uses that ability to have a conversation in the best way possible.
Yeah, and I think it makes sense. I mean, just like when you use a phone bank software, the first time you see it, you're not going to be as good at it as the next time you see it. So you're longtime vetted volunteers that come every cycle for the phone bank. They might do okay, but those who this is their first time, and that's going to be a lot of them, they're going to be a lot slower on the calls than those who've done it before. So, you know, at CampaignHQ, we've got a team of people that are making those calls every day, and they're also making text messages every day now too. So that's something that, you know, we can be more efficient than the volunteer can be. This is not the first time that our callers have seen it. This isn't the first time I've set one up, so that's kind of one of the clear-cut advantages to using a firm like ours to send those messages rather than using a volunteer. Now, looks like we got a question there. Kids.
Okay. Does the law require P2P messages to be sent by volunteers, or can they be sent by paid individuals?
There's no stipulation in the law that I've found that requires it to be sent by volunteers. In fact, the whole reason peer-to-peer or text messaging is legal is because it is not illegal. There's no legislation that I've been able to find surrounding peer-to-peer text messaging, and that's been validated by at least 2 different legal firms that we've worked with, and you might have some more details on
absolutely. That. And what makes peer-to-peer text messaging permissible is that an individual human being initiates each message, reads each response, and then initiates a response. So, so what makes it permissible is the lack of automation, not necessarily the status of the person sending the message.
Great point. I wanted to show everybody kind of what that looks like, because there is some assists that we're using with a peer-to-peer platform that's going to make this more efficient and a better way to control your message, A, and then B, reach out to a lot of people than if I were to just go, say, buy a bunch of burner phones and have our call center agent sit and type out each text message individually. This right here on the screen is an example of what it looks like when we pull up, when we start a peer-to-peer text message campaign. So I'm an agent, I'm logging in, this is my assignment for the day. Over here on the left-hand side, you can see a list of voters to reach out to. Right now we have the infamous Marlis Popma from here at CHQ and myself on the list. So that's going to be the 2 people on the list for this example to send messages to. But this list could be thousands long. You know, it really is scalable to a very high degree. So there could be thousands and thousands of messages here and conversations here, and the system's going to help us keep those organized and present them to our agent in a way that they can have a fluid 2-way conversation with many, many people at the same time. So you can see right here, we've got our list of callers over here, and then down here, we have the message, right? This is a pre-scripted response. It populates for the agent before, you know, they don't have to type this out. And you can see I've got a merge field here for first name. So my first contact is Marlis. When I come down here and I click that send button, it's going to punch her name in. It's going to send a message out to her. And then it's going to load up my next contact, which is Walter. You can see Marlis no longer appears here, and I can send out to Walter. So send that next one to Walter, and I've done my outbound messages. Now I need to deal with the responses, right? And so when I'm dealing with the responses, you can see first over here on the left-hand side, this is an example of what that message looks like when it comes into your phone, right? It's a normal text message, just like any other that you would receive. It's coming from a long-form phone number. And speaking of the long-form phone number, this is a point that I want to pause and talk about, because we can typically obtain a local area code to send the text messages from, and we have a bank of phone numbers available that are already provisioned within the systems to be able to do that across, you know, a lot of different localities. I don't have every single area code in America already provisioned because that would be overhead that wouldn't make sense to carry. That being said, though, I can get pretty much any area code provisioned into the system. So if it's a small area or in some metro areas where the phone numbers are tougher to get a hold of, we might not have one on file. So giving us a little bit of lead time to get one provisioned in the system definitely makes sure that we can be local to your area, have that message coming from a number that seems or that people will recognize as being a local number, and the area that should be coming from that candidate. That being said, one other point that I want to make here is that, you know, with a phone call, I could, if you wanted your campaign office to be the caller ID, I can make your campaign office the caller ID. I can't do that with a text message because, again, it needs to be provisioned within the system so that messages get routed properly back and forth. So just a little bit of a technical caveat there for those who might be curious. Okay, so back to our conversation example here. I've sent out my message. arrives in the inbox exactly like you'd expect. It's a simple text message. And then Walter, myself, I've responded. So absolutely love the NRA and John Doe. Can't wait till he runs for president. You'll notice that my name was merged in there. It doesn't have that funky first name. Okay, so I've gotten a yes response from my voter, and this is how it shows up for my agent. You'll notice that the emoticon comes through just fine. So many people who use text message as a form of conversation regularly use those emoticons and shortcuts all the time. It comes through on our peer-to-peer system just like it would on your cell phone. So no problems there. Now I need to respond to this person, right? So they've said yes. We're going to go back and look at the ways that we can do this while keeping a high level of message control. Right here, I've got some pre-scripted responses that I've made available to my agents. I'm asking if they can support John Doe in our example conversation here. So the responses that I'm expecting to get are, yes, no, not sure. Those are the ones that I'm expecting. People could respond with something else, but I definitely expect at least those, and that's what I want to collect data on. So I've got the yes response. I know that it was yes. He didn't say yes, but he said absolutely, love the NRA, and I've got a real person reading it, so they know that that's what he means. Yes, I'm going to vote for John Doe. So all my agent has to do is click this message. It pre-populates that text, sends it out to them, and you've got that appropriate dialogue going back and forth, staying on message. The way that we want to there.
And actually, Walter, one of the most effective things that I've seen candidates and campaigns do lately with this is really tailoring the message to how the voter responds. And I think this is an opportunity where you can use the richness of the medium to do something that that's actually a little bit beyond just a conversation. This is where using the smartphone and all the opportunities for content really come in. As an example, if we get this message back that says absolutely love the NRA and John Doe, in that reply, I'd love to see, great, polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Click this link to find a map to your polling location. So all of a sudden, that person can get something that they actually couldn't have gotten on the live call with us. We could read the information to them, but we couldn't provide them an instantly clickable link. But if someone says, no, I hate John Doe and I want to support Hillary Clinton instead, well, we certainly don't want to share the polling location with that person or when polls are open. We just want to, we want to politely get out of that conversation and move on. But I think that to me, the best opportunity comes with people who are unsure, because at that point you have someone who is willing to engage in the dialogue, who cares enough about the race and enough about voting to want to know more, or at the very least to want to engage with you. And so we've seen folks who are putting a link to a video, and then you have your candidate speaking direct to camera, right to that person, and all of a sudden your candidate is having a conversation with that person. Now it's not an interactive conversation, but you gave a special message to people who are specifically unsure about whom they're going to vote, and you're giving your candidate the opportunity to close the deal with that person. Candidates right now, these are the kind of folks, if you think about mid to low propensity voters, people who vote in presidential years, they might see a link to your ad in their sponsored Facebook post, 100 times, and they're scrolling by really, really fast and they don't click. But if you've engaged with them in an open, clear channel where there's not a lot of other clutter, where there's not a lot of other messaging going on, all of a sudden you have an opportunity for someone to see that video at the exact moment they're thinking about you, thinking about your race. And so, so when people tailor the content they share based on the responses, I think that's when we're seeing our best results, and that's where we're really seeing the most value of what peer-to-peer text messaging has to offer.
Yep, absolutely. In fact, the other really neat part about that, or about the peer-to-peer, is that you can really tailor each message the way that you're talking about. We've seen that used really successfully in a couple of different races we're working on, where we're sending them a map to the polling location, et cetera, et cetera. Really, really neat stuff. But we can also tailor it on the fly. So for the example, coming back here to the conversation we were looking at, my yes response, if somebody says yes, they support John Doe, I've scripted in great, because it's great that they support John Doe. Not everybody's going to always respond with something that great is appropriate, though. So if somebody says, yes, I support John Doe, however, I've had some medical issues and I might be out of state getting surgery or something during elections, I didn't expect that response to come in, but because I had a human read that message, I can have them use the pre-scripted response that might indicate when polls are open or absentee ballot. We can have that information available to the agent for those alternate methods of voting, and we can use the pre-scripted response but edit it to fit the person's situation. So I'll remove that grade and maybe say, well, I'm sorry to hear you're having a medical issue or something like that, and get back to them that way. The other neat part with that is that when you're using an automated message, you can collect data using an automated message to an opt-in list, but you're leaving some data on the table always, because even if I end my message with reply yes if John Doe can support you, first of all, we're leaving data on the table because we're only able to text those who have opted in to receive the text message. But second of all, people might have typos or respond other than using exactly yes, and you can program a lot of them, yes, sure, okay, absolutely. But am I going to think of every possible misspelling and way to do it that the computer's going to catch all of them and gather that bucket? Probably not. But any person with reasonable reading comprehension is going to see that, yes, this response that I just got was a yes response, so I'm going to code it that way in the system. I've interpreted the absolutely into a yes. I'm capturing more data than the computer could.
Right, just like a live call in that case.
Just like a live call, exactly. There's a lot of similarities to a live call, being able to change your response as far as how you transition back into your pre-scripted message.
So it's still an empathetic medium.
Bingo. Yes. You can have a conversation. It's one person texting one person. But you're able to do it really quickly and efficiently in an organized fashion where that wasn't necessarily around just a couple of years ago. So that's really neat. I do see that we've got a question from someone. They're asking how we could get numbers of potential voters and cell phone numbers and what the cost for that would be.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head, which is that we can only send text messages to folks for whom we have a mobile phone. And so anytime we get a list, that comes into us, whether it's for texting or whether it's for a phone call, the first thing we do with any data we receive is we do a mobile scrub. So we know immediately which records on your list are landlines, which records on your list are mobile phones. So if you've got a voter file, we can immediately go through and identify how many mobile phones you already have. If you don't already have a voter file, we can go out and acquire and purchase data for you. We work with several different data providers, and so we can find as many mobile phones that are out there that meet your criteria as you're looking for. So that's something that, on a case-by-case basis, we'll find out what you need, figure out what it's going to take, and then work with our various data providers to get that done for you.
Yep, good stuff. All right, so we talked a little bit about, getting valid data through that voter ID example. Let's talk really quickly about the results we've seen so far. We've already mentioned, we've made almost 1 million text messages. I've got quite a few numbers to look at here and see, okay, how much are people actually responding to this medium? Because for us here at CHQ, this is a pretty new thing. We've been doing this for 9 months now, 8 months. But now we actually have some real tangible results to look back on and say, okay, this is definitely working. People are responding to this in a wide variety of different voter contact types. So first thing, as far as response rate, so how many people actually reply to a text message from somebody they haven't met before? When we ask them a question out of the blue surrounding politics, right? Well, the highest that I've seen has been in the 30% range. So in an ideal universe, or what I would consider a pretty ideal universe of people to reach out to, the 30% number has been coming from texting active donors, within the last couple of years to an incumbent governor. You got some pretty good name ID. Yeah. We already have an ongoing conversation with these people on their cell phones, and we get about 30% of people responding to us via text too. So these are people who were phone responsive that are also text responsive at any given time. We're getting in the 30% range on that initial pass. For a more normal universe that you might be reaching out to, a more normal audience, we've been seeing in the 10 to 15% range. That's something that you can expect. If you're asking people a question, 10 to 15% are gonna come back. For a less than ideal universe, reaching out to a a cold voter universe of low propensity voters for maybe lower name ID candidate. The lowest rates that I've seen so far have been in the 6 to 7% range. So that's kind of what you can expect as far as how many people will not only see your text message, but then take action and respond to it. When we're including links to click, we're seeing some pretty awesome click rates. In fact, usually the click rate supersedes the response rate. So more people will click that link than will send you a text back. Typical click rate that we're seeing there is in about the 15% range. So, definitely a great way to drive that digital content that we're already creating as part of the campaign cycle is, getting it in front of them via text message. We're getting some pretty sweet cost per click out of driving content that way. One thing that I want to talk about, or actually another thing that I find pretty cool, since I've got it here on the screen, is this do not disturb rate.
Yeah.
We talked earlier about how people want to talk via text message. The self-reported survey said people would rather communicate via text message than through other means. This has really been validated to me, even when they're being approached by a campaign or a PAC. That still holds true, because our do not disturb rate, the rate of people who actually ask us to not talk to them via text message, the highest that I've seen is in the low 2s, so the low 2% range. Average is about 0.5 to 0.75% of the list that we text out to asks us to not reach out to them via text message. So I think that really validates what we were talking about earlier, some of the anecdotal and the self-reported surveys and stuff. We're definitely seeing that in the do not disturb rate. People like to talk to us this way. We get people texting back. They have long conversations, and they don't ask us to stop. And that's a pretty good indicator when you're marketing, right? And if they don't ask you to stop, then it hasn't been a nuisance or a bother to folks. So that was something really cool to see, and was maybe lower than I would have expected going into it, but it's been consistently in that range. Now, delivery on text messages is assured, and the way that it's assured is that similar to an email, you're going to get a receipt back when that message is delivered. So if I send a text message to Nicole and her phone is off, the carrier is going to keep trying that until her phone comes on. And then once the phone gives a read receipt back, or a delivered receipt back, that's when it stops attempting to deliver that message. So we know how many of your numbers that we've determined were mobile are actually able to be texted, which is usually a very, very high percentage. And then, so yeah, we can. My point is that it's reportable, similar to an email, how many actually were delivered to the intended destination.
Right, the high 90% have been delivered at this point.
Oh yeah, it's always been in the high 90s. And now, one thing that's a little less clear, and I think email probably has better reporting here, is on the open rates. So how many people that we delivered the message to opened it and read it? That's a little bit tougher to determine with a text message, because not every phone will provide a read receipt when you open that message. It doesn't give us that data back. Now, there is some numbers that we have to look at there to make an assumption on where we're at with that, and all signs point to the high 90s there as well. There's some devices that do provide that read receipt, and on those devices, we're getting in the high 90% range, 97 to 99% of those specific devices. When you send a message to them, they open it. And then there's also some self-reported surveys that are done after the fact, where it's, hey, did you see this text message? And people are reporting a yes, I saw that, in the high 90% range as well.
And I think a lot of folks know this, but SMS is actually the single most used feature on a smartphone. A survey showed that 97% of people with a smartphone had either received or sent a text message in the last week. And you think about it, probably some of you by this point in the conversation have gotten bored and checked your text messages at least once. So we know that it's a method of communication by which sometimes people open it. You'll open it just so you don't have any new messages appearing. And actually, funny story, we sent out a few emails to let people know we were having this webinar today, and we had a great response rate. We were really thrilled about it. And then we actually sent a peer-to-peer text message out last night, and the response to that was just absolutely incredible. One of the responses Walter got, which was really neat, was, well, I wouldn't say it was neat, but we had an individual on our email list who had been on our email list for 4 years. We send out probably 1 email a month, so this person had gotten at least 48 marketing emails from us. And at no point in time did he feel compelled to respond and say, I no longer work in politics, the content isn't relevant to me. 1 text message after 4 years of no contact, and immediately he responded. It was a very pleasant conversation. He, very, very gracious about the whole thing. Wanted to let us know what he was doing. Wanted to connect on LinkedIn. But 1 text message got through where 48 emails did not.
Yeah, which was really neat. In fact, there's some people on right now that didn't respond to my email, but did respond to that text message, and here they are on the webinar listening to us talk about text messaging. Which again, didn't get through with the email, but we did get through with the text message. That's not to say that these other channels don't have a place or a market, because they definitely do.
Right.
But this is something new that we are getting a really, really strong response rate for, and it's something that I believe that on the right we need to be catching up, and we need to be playing the game the right way in order to get our message out to the numbers that we're going to need coming up in November. Right. Across the board, our clients so far have had really, really overwhelmingly positive feedback. The one case study that I have to talk about today is, we did a project in Nebraska leading up to their primaries, and this was pretty early on in our text messaging experience. I didn't really know what to expect. The client didn't know what to expect, but we thought it would be good, and we decided to go ahead and roll with it. And the goal here was we were trying to drive, the Trump voters, the 2016 one-time voters that never voted before, into to kind of help tilt the scales in some high-risk incumbent races. So these were folks that it wasn't looking great for them coming up into the primaries, that they might actually lose their seat in the primary. So sat down with Kenny Zoller over there, the executive director. We came up with a pretty comprehensive mail, phone, text program to try and drive these one-time 2016 Trump voters to the polls for a primary election in a mid-year, in a midterm election. Definitely had a challenge ahead of us, but the text message response was just overwhelming to me. I mean, we had over 15% click-through rates to these one-time voters during a midterm election. Really driving these people to the digital content in a really effective way. And then, I think we did 3 different rounds of text messages to these folks. The click-through rate stayed solid. The response rates on the ones that we were asking questions and collecting data were in that, above 10% range all the way through after repeated interactions with these voters. And at the end of the day, we were running this with 8 at-risk incumbents, and 6 of them won their election with double-digit margins. So it ended up being a really successful program all the way around. Kenny's allowed us to use his name as we and has provided us a quote for it. He's been ecstatic with it. They've come back a couple of times for some other projects, and it's been a really exciting thing. This has been a fun experience for me. We already talked a little bit about the text messaging to get people on our text message webinar. I should have known, because I've been doing this with the voters, but I wasn't expecting the types of conversations that I had through that. It was a really cool experience. We cleaned up our list in a good way. That one example you gave, there was several of those where they had never responded to one of our emails in 30, 40 emails in a row, and yet one text message, they're coming back, and we're making that touch, getting that connection again. So it's a really powerful tool, something that has been a great thing to work with, and we're really excited to be promoting and working with more campaigns on this cycle.
Absolutely. Do we have another question there?
Oh, we don't.
Oh, okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Oh, yes, we do. Yeah, that's a new one. It says, what's the cost, and what's the cost of obtaining the cell numbers?
So, absolutely. We'll give you a call after this, and we'll talk through that with you.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I will say, but before going into that and going into our closing, is one of the things that's really exciting about this is that as we, in 2013, when the FCC ruling went into effect that we can no longer use our predictive dialers to dial cell phones, the cost of reaching people on their mobile devices increased. In fact, it doubled or more than doubled. Sending interactive peer-to-peer text messages is an extremely affordable way to reach voters, to have multiple contacts with voters, and to do so in a channel that they're listening to. So it is, it's the kind of opportunity that, we've seen campaigns, statewide gubernatorial campaigns use it, and we've seen state legislative campaigns use it, and that's really a great opportunity to know that, no matter what kind of issue, what kind of cause, what kind of candidate, it's an opportunity to be able to communicate your message for the conservative cause. Were there any other questions?
Yep. Does this system have an API or results file so we can integrate it with our records? And can our volunteers use your system?
Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the data. The data works very much like the data works when we do your live calls or we do your automated calls. Most folks are using a database, whether it's Nation Builder or i360 or any one of the others. When you export your list, you're going to send it to us in either an Excel or a CSV file, and it's going to have an ID number on it. You want to make sure that ID number is on every single record. When we go through and do our peer-to-peer text messages, we'll code every response with a date, with a disposition, and with all of the information that they gave us, whether they said yes, no, undecided, do not disturb, etc. So we'll send that back to you each day, and so you can then immediately just go back and upload that just like you'd upload data that was made by any call center or any other technology where you would have to re-upload your file. So as long as you send us that unique ID, we're going to be able to get that back to you. We're going to return it every day, and it's going to be in a standard format, the exact same columns, the exact same formatting in which you sent it to us. And then the second question on the volunteers, our platform is really not necessarily tailored to volunteer use, just like the dialers that volunteers use. The Victory VoIP phones and things like that aren't necessarily tailored to a professional call center. With that said, though, there are some good applications on the market, and we'd be happy to make recommendations to you for something we think your volunteers would be able to use effectively and would work for your needs.
Yes.
Excellent. Well, if there are no other questions, are there any other questions?
I don't see any.
Okay. Okay.
We'll make that a last chance. Here's one.
Okay.
Okay, so if they say do not text them again, can we still call them for other reasons and for other platforms?
If they say to us, do not disturb, we will not text that number again on our peer-to-peer texting platform. That would be separate from our do not calls.
That being said, if you wanted to, we'll be reporting that back to you. So how you choose to integrate that into what data you continue to contact after that, you'll have complete control over. So we can report back who asked to not be disturbed, and if you decide that you might want to expand that into other universes and other ways that you're contacting people, that's great. You can do that. If not, we will not ever text them again if they ask not to be. All right, I think that's all our questions, Nicole.
Excellent. Well, great. I want to thank everyone so much for joining us today. I think the people who chose to be on this call are the folks who are really forward-looking and really ready to communicate with voters in a different way, in a new way, in the way they want to be communicated with. We're really excited to work with everyone. The projects that we've done so far have been, after a long time in the world of voter contact, it's absolutely exhilarating to work on something that is so new, to be on the cutting edge of it, and to see those results come in. It's really been a gratifying experience to see what the campaigns have been able to get out of the opportunity. So if you've got any questions, if you want to get started, our contact information is on the screen. Please get in touch with us. Thanks again, and really looking forward to celebrating some great victories with everyone on November 6th.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.